Hey everyone, welcome to the next lesson of Getting Real. So let's get real. So this lesson we're going to talk about a little bit more some real life questions and how to go with the whole transition of going from virtual to real, and some key questions that you might have already or you will have in the future, and we want to proactively talk about them now. So right now you're as prepared as you can be from all the theory that we've done in the course so far and how to physically buy and sell and etc. But you might have some practical questions like these that we'll try to go over now. So how much should I be investing? So clearly defining a savings rate and how to do that. What savings rate should I be going for, and the things around this that you can control and influence yourself. Investing in the market versus investing in yourself. If I have savings already, should I invest it all at once? The short answer is no, but we'll be talking about that. Tips to stay consistent. What happens if I see losses? How to deal with when there is a hype in a sector and if we should invest. How to surround yourself with other investors to keep learning. And a summary of some key important rules to take away. So, the first topic. So, how much should I invest? Just start small. What matters here is time and compound interest, and you building the habit to take advantage of these things. Start by putting 10% of your net income each month and go from there. And make sure you just grow over time. Time is the biggest factor here. And if you already have significant savings, that would be an ideal starting point to start with some of those and then continue contributing to it with your paychecks every month. Now, remember our example of Larry Linger in Module 1. He didn't invest at all, and he always kept on waiting and ended up worse than Rosie Rotten, who always invested at the worst time in the year. So the point is here, you don't want to be like Larry, you don't want to linger. You want to already start small, and build it over time. So as life develops and your income increases over time, your ability to cover basic necessities and comfort greatly increases, and you may be able to contribute a higher percentage than the 10% of the net income that we talked about before. And why would we want to save more? It sounds pretty simple, but the more we save, the faster our wealth grows. Pretty obvious, right? But let's see with some calculations the magnitude of the different saving scenarios of saving 10%, 20%, and 35%. So you'll have seen our earlier compound interest calculator that we used before. This is basically a screenshot from that site of some assumptions of, let's say, an annual income of 75,000, savings rate here of 10%, so that means a monthly deposit of 625 euros, or in whatever currency that you're in, dollars, US, Australian dollars, or pounds, or whatever currency that you're doing, just a saving rate of 10%. And let's assume that over time, each year, your annual income or deposit growth figure that you put in there, for some people, that's a pretty conservative estimate, I'd say, because most people's, or a lot of people's incomes and skills naturally grow over time. So, it would slightly beat inflation at 2% expected. So 4% is like a little bit above that, but realistically, it's going to be a little bit more. But we want to stay conservative. That's why we also have the 9% compound interest that we always work with. That's the long-term average of the 50 years, but 10% or 11%, a little bit higher, could also be expected, but we'll go with 9 for compound interest, and let's assume our annual income itself grows by 4%. Anyways, math aside, those are the assumptions. The future investment value is almost 1.7 million after 30 years, so things grow drastically. In the end, 75% of your wealth is generated purely through the interest. If the compound interest of your investments is more than 9%, let's say 10% or 11% even, the total interest earned, the percentage, this will go way, way up. You can play around in the calculator yourself, but considering just 9%, 75% will be in interest and 25% will be your own deposits. So you basically 4x your total money over the long run. Now, so anyways, 1.7 with 10%. Now, if we go to 20%, if we double it, it goes from 1.7 million to almost 3.4 million. So it already starts to drastically increase. And then with 35%, it skyrockets all the way up to almost 6 million in the future investment value in 30 years. So makes sense, right? The more you save, the more you can invest, the bigger your wealth is that you build over time. But since they all have the same deposit growth rate assumptions and the same compound interest assumptions of 9%, you'll see here on the previous slides, they all have roughly the same sort of exponential curve. So, in short, what does this mean in the three scenarios? You can think about it two ways. One is the amount of money that you accumulate by the end. But what you can also think about, and what a lot of people, it's the reason why they save or invest aggressively early on to get the ball rolling, because they want to reach certain financial goals, certain money amounts that they maybe want to retire on, or maybe it's a personal amount that they want to have for themselves to have financial security or freedom in order to take bigger risks in life or be where they want to be, or whatever it is that you want. You can also think about it in terms of time needed to reach the particular goal. So with a savings rate of 10%, if you, let's say, had a goal of trying to reach $1 million or $1.5 million, you would reach these goals in year 26 and year 29. So, on this graph that we just showed before, 26 and 29, so around, this year, this is where you then reach, this is when you cross the million threshold, and for 1.5 million, it's year 29. That's when you cross it. So that's basically how it works. If you go to savings rate 20%, obviously your final amount increases to double the rate. But what you also get is you reach your financial milestones of whatever they are much faster. So if we were to take the milestone of reaching $1 million, instead of year 26, you reach it in year 20. And from 1.5 to year 29, you reach it in 23. So you buy yourself 6 years of time, 6 years of working to reach the same financial goal if you jump from 10% to 20% in this example scenario. And for the savings rate of 35%, you buy, instead of 6 years, you buy even 11 years of time. So you reach year 15 instead of year 26, and year 18 instead of year 29. So you buy yourself over a decade of time. This is, in my opinion, one of the biggest influences or the reasons why I personally try to invest or save aggressively, is because you save yourself actual decades of your life. Some people who want to save those decades in order to take that capital and start a business or buy a house, you can just do it way sooner. Or if you want to retire, you can also do that way sooner, or at least more importantly, have the flexibility to. In Psychology, Money, and many other books, they often say that the biggest indicator or pre-indicator of happiness is the sense of freedom and control. If you have financial security for yourself and you achieve it sooner, or have a roadmap to achieving it a lot sooner, and having that stress also off of your head, you in the end will be happier, or at least you won't have the stress of worrying about trading your time away from money and being able to retire in the right amount of time. You basically buy back time by saving a little bit more. Anyways, so what do we have written here? Okay, you can do this, 100 different ways with your own salary assumptions, like your net income assumptions, different savings rate, different scenarios. But the point is to show that if you have a target amount in mind that you're going to retire off of, or whatever your goals are, increasing your savings set aside for investment, either by increasing your savings percentage or the total income earning capacity. So, I mean, if your income goes up, then 10% is no longer 625 euros, but if your income goes up, 10% might mean 1,000 euros. So the point is that the absolute number, so the actual euro or dollar amount that you can contribute, goes up, because that means either through a better job or a business expansion or even tax optimization, you buy back time, which is one of the most important luxuries in the world, which I just explained before. So what savings rate should I be going for then? This is ultimately up to you. This is not going to be the same situation for everyone, but 10% of your net income per month should really be your lowest bar of investment for you to have any chance to build wealth. The important thing here is that 10% is the lowest amount that starts to become meaningful over time, but the main thing is that you stick with it. That's why 10% is a good amount to just start with to build the habit, and then you can start to go from there. So go through your own budget for the biggest expenses to be able to understand how much further you can push your savings rate up from 10%. And there are people on this course that I'm sure who even save up to 70% of their net income. And it all depends on your situation, but there is one big positive driver and 3 to 4 big costs that will really determine your ability to determine your savings rate and how much real wealth you can build and the freedom of time that you can buy back for yourself. And we'll be talking about this. So you might then be asking, okay, what are these big levers of my investing wealth creation? A common example brought up by finance influencers and business professionals is the stop buying €6 or $6 Starbucks coffees or €10 avocado toasts. It's the main thing that you hear on Instagram, or it used to be a few years ago. So, I mean, let's look at this. We know that, 6 euros saved today and invested at 9% means over 88 euros in 33 years' time. So the true cost of something today is over 14 times the amount in 30 years' time. So that's it on the most minuscule level. So let's look at the true cost of having those 2 coffees a day for, let's say, 6 days a week. Let's assume Sunday is the one day that you don't go out and get a coffee or whatever. So 6 euros times 2 times a day times 6 days a week. So you get, your coffee in the morning and then another kicker again in the afternoon. So that's 72 euros a week. Per month, this means 72 euros times 4.5 weeks in a month. So that means 324 euros a month. Assuming inflation of coffee at 2% per year, after 30 years, this costs you over 700,000 euros. Or in terms of time goals, 4 years of time to reach the $1 million and $1.5 million goals, or euros, so whatever it is. Doesn't matter what the currency is that I'm saying here, it works for every currency. That's basically what it's costing you in time. So we know that expenses like Starbucks coffees and avocado toast can have a big cumulative effect. I mean, these costs do accumulate over time. And a lot of finance influencers talk about this because they want you to push yourself in saving to get the ball rolling on your saving and investing, as we know that the more money that spends more time in the market, the more compound interest can take over and grow exponentially. This is completely true. But actually, in our opinion, while saving on those small costs helps, this isn't what's going to be the real big driver of your wealth. The sentence isn't written correctly, but it isn't going to be the main way that your wealth is really going to be built. You're not going to create millions by saving on coffee or avocado toast. It helps for sure, but it isn't the main big driver. So, what are the big levers of my investing wealth creation? The big drivers that affect how much you can save, in our opinion, are these things. The big positive driver is earning capacity and income. Makes sense. And then the 4 big costs that people have are housing, transportation, taxes, which is, for a lot of people forget about this, but it's actually, for many people, their biggest expense. And then luxury expenses like vacations, clothes, etc. You can include avocado and coffees into this as well. But in our opinion, things such as the avocado toast or the coffee, in the end, you should still just enjoy your life. And also, you may need these things in order to be happy enough, to be productive enough, to then focus on the bigger things like your job, your business, etc. So don't stop living your life, but there are some other things that you can help optimize for. So, earning capacity. Simple, right? The more you earn from your job, freelancing, or business, the more you can invest into your future. We don't need to really calculate for this. You can just do those calculations yourself. What happens if I get a 30,000 increase in a promotion, or etc., or if I grow my business or my freelancing by X amount, or I work more. You can just do your own calculations. Just remember to invest into yourself to improve your skills and excel at your work. And it's another reason why investing should be kept super simple and time efficient. So this is another big bonus of an index investing. It takes almost no effort and no thinking time. Just do the investment, check in every few months, make sure it automatically invests every month, or you just do the quick investment yourself so that you can focus your time elsewhere in your life. Onto relaxing, going to the gym, working, etc., spending time with your family. There are so many other aspects of your life that you want to spend time on. So now let's go on to the big drivers. Housing. So let's say the housing was one of the biggest expenses in life for sure. I mean, rent, mortgage payments, etc. It's for sure a big cost, right? Everyone complains about rent. Now let's think about whether in a renting scenario or a mortgage scenario, the real cost of upgrading to a larger place from 1,200 euro per month to 2,000 per month. This is maybe just an example scenario of you're in your place, which is fine right now, or you could live into it, but your ego is maybe pushing you to, maybe I could do with more space, etc. But let's look at the real cost of that. So if you decided to not do that upgrade from a 1,200 place to a 2,000 place, so you have an additional 800 euros per month. If you didn't save on that or you stopped from upgrading, after 30 years, this costs you 1.8 million or 7 years of time to reach the 1 million and 1.5 million goals. A lot of people really forget about this, is that You might be upgrading to a slightly larger place, but you just cost yourself 7 years of progress in your life. So it's a huge cost that really accumulates over time. So this number, it's a significant cost, but way bigger than you think down the line in what it's actually costing you in the future. Now the second bucket, transportation. What is the real cost of buying that new 50,000 mid-range car, maybe a middle series BMW or whatever, versus buying maybe a similar or same car, but secondhand or a slightly lower tier, but still gets the job done, is a good car, but slightly on the mid-lower end or is just at least used? That decision between going for that much higher ticket versus something similar, but just way more price efficient. So having that additional 35,000 euros at the start, so the difference between these two purchase decisions. After 30 years, this costs you almost 500,000, or in time speak, 3 years of time to reach the 1 million and 1.5 million goals. Realistically, though, this isn't the only time you'll be making such a purchase decision when it comes to cars or transportation. You might be making such a purchase decision once every 10 to 15 years. So you might be facing this choice 2 more times over the period, each time losing more and more years of time. And then taxes. For most high-income earners, this is actually their biggest expense out of everything. Yet many people don't actually realize that you can optimize for it. Although this is specifically for people who aren't regular employees. So if you're a freelancer or a business owner or an investor or a retiree, a retired person, or finally, if you are an employee, like a remote worker, etc., and you have flexibility of where you could potentially live or how you could potentially set yourself up in terms of tax residency, this is where you can really adjust what you're doing, what you're earning. So on our previous example of, let's say, this person that has a net income of 75,000 euros, it will depend on where you live, how much exactly you're paying in taxes. But let's assume you live maybe in Europe or a similar taxation region. So we can assume that you maybe pay an effective rate of, let's say, 40%. So that means your gross salary was actually 120,000 euros is what you were actually starting with. So unless you're a completely regular employee, as explained before, you could actually optimize your taxes downwards with a proper restructuring. And this is actually what our tax tailor service is for, which, as mentioned at the beginning of the course and maybe elsewhere, if you actually complete this course and all the milestones, you'll have a 50 euro voucher towards our tax tailor service. So this is actually very much achievable, where let's assume you restructured yourself or created holding companies that you could take advantage of for your income, or move to a low tax country and brought the 40% tax rate down to, let's say, 5%. I know there are countries and structures that you earn 0% or 10%. Let's just assume 5%. So that's already a big shift. This means you bring your 75,000 net income up to net 118,750 euros of income, or dollars, etc. So you're now only paying 5%. This reduction of taxes means almost 44,000 difference per year, which is a huge amount. So an additional 3,600 per month. After 30 years, if you didn't make this switch, this would have cost you 8 million or 15 years of your life of time to reach the 1 million goal, and 16 years of your time to reach the 1.5 million goal. So it's a huge difference. A lot of people just forget about the fact that when you have your gross income, a huge amount is just taken out, and what you're finally left with in terms of net, that gap is huge. And it's something, if you're not a completely regular employee and you don't have any sort of flexibility, you can actually optimize for it if you have some form of flexibility. So this is like a huge cost. Now, finally, luxury expenses. So vacations, clothes, etc. Let's assume that you might be doing luxury expenses for yourself, like the occasional vacation trips, designer clothes, shoes, expensive dining, etc. This is obviously going to be different for everyone. Everyone leads a completely different lifestyle and how they like to spend their money. But imagine you maybe on average cut it out or just drastically reduced it. So a person on that level of income, let's say they reduce their luxury expenses, and that saves them an additional 1,000 euros per month. After 30 years, this costs you, based on this scenario, this costs you 2.2 million euros, or 9 years of time to reach the 1 million and 1.5 million goals. So again, a huge chunk of money in terms of your final portfolio, but also more importantly, a lot of years of time, almost a decade of time. So to recap, you'll see here housing, 800 per month, 7 years of time, almost 2 million of difference after 30 years. Transport, you've got 3 years of time loss, 500,000 of difference after 30 years, but you'll probably have this cost maybe 2 more times. I mean, one car average lifespan, or you may not be able to have it last the whole 30 years. So you might be facing this kind of cost or similar costs of a similar magnitude multiple times during the next 30 years. So it's just to sort of give you a guideline of roughly how much it's costing you. Taxes, as mentioned, surprising to a lot of people, but it is a massive cost of your time, and over 8 million of difference in this scenario over 30 years. Luxury expenses, etc. Even more if you have more Starbucks and avocado toasts. These are the big costs. And the big positive driver is dependent on improving your skill set, getting that promotion, growing your business, becoming independent, etc. The more you earn, the more you can invest. The more you earn, or the more you're able to reduce these costs, the more you can invest and the more time you buy back for yourself. Of course, if you earn more, just be careful to not give it away in taxes, because, you know, if this box here becomes bigger, this box of taxes also becomes bigger. So just be careful that you always try to see or think about how you can tax optimize. Anyways, or sometimes you might not even have to think about it. If you're someone who isn't a completely regular employee, then as mentioned, we have our Tax Tailor service that focuses on reducing your taxes legally and taking away the pain for you. But anyways, so as you can see on our 75K net income example, starting from a 10% savings rate. Just remember, all of these scenarios are based on the starting scenario of 10% savings rate. What are the big levers of wealth creation that are in your control and can save you decades of time and multiple millions in wealth creation? So if I optimize on all of this accumulated amount of wealth and, more importantly, time. Remember, you can always invest, and you're investing aggressively, you're doing super well, you reach your goals a lot faster, and that means you can also then reduce the amount that you're investing later and just start to go into retirement mode, or maybe take a lower paying job that fulfills you more. Whatever it is, there's so much that you're buying with having wealth built and time flexibility bought for yourself. So how much should I then save or invest? So when you ask yourself, how much should I invest? What savings rate should I go for? How does it change things? You should now have a very clear idea of how you can drastically change how much you can invest with the big levers of wealth creation we just discussed, and how much time from your life you buy back for yourself. So yeah, here are the 3 scenarios: 10%, 20%, 35%. Let's just ignore the taxes for now, but just going back to the savings rate scenarios makes a huge difference in terms of final amounts that you're getting, and let's not forget the time that you buy back. So how much should I invest? A dance with your ego. So yeah, this is one thing we should take note of, is that in general, there are 3 groups of people: those who save, those who don't think they can save, and those who don't think they need to save. So building wealth has little to do with actually income levels or investment returns, but lots to do with your savings rate. If you view building wealth as hard and requiring more money or better investment returns, it will seem out of your control, which is a huge negative and huge stress factor. But if you instead see it as powered by your own frugality and efficient personal finance, the path is clear and in your control. Wealth is just simply accumulated leftovers after you spent what your ego wants you to. So in short, savings is actually the gap between ego and income. The gap here is what matters. This is why so many high earners save so little. They struggle to manage their ego. And why some modest earners achieve unbelievable results. They manage their ego and they trust the process. Remember Ronald Read from earlier in the course, a janitor or gas station attendant. He then passed away as one of the richest people in the US, and donated a lot to philanthropy and left a lot to his children. Someone on such a modest income as being a janitor, no hate or shade on janitors or whatever, but it's just an example of a lower, more modest income scenario where he was able to build with consistency a massive amount of wealth. The next question: investing in the market versus investing in yourself. So it's a very common question. You know the true cost of the big 4 costs of housing, transportation, taxes, and luxury expenses. But remember the big positive driver: your earning income capacity. This is the biggest driver of your wealth creation, or one of the biggest. Obviously, if you can increase the income, it's obviously great for how much you can actually save. And if you see opportunities to go through trainings or watch masterclasses or develop your businesses or anything to help really improve your skill set and improve your income, do it. Do it as a priority over investing in the market. So remember, obviously it's great to get 9%, and you should keep doing that and keeping consistent. But if you see an opportunity to really develop yourself, this is huge for you. So remember, the expected ROI of index investing is 9% per year, but the expected ROI of getting better at your work or your business is far higher than that. So if you're able to then suddenly increase your income from your work or your business by 10, 20, 30% from you just completing something or going through something, do that. That takes priority. Remember, the more you earn, the more income you have, the more wealth you can build while also actually enjoying your life. All right, quick break. Now, if I have savings already, should I invest it all at once? First, you should always keep an emergency fund in liquid cash. So, in reality, surprises always happen in real life. Maybe you have a medical emergency, so maybe something breaks, you have to buy a new bike, you lose your job, etc. And you need to have emergency savings set aside for this. Because what you don't want is to interrupt your compounding by taking money out of your investments, or worst of all, interrupting it at a bad time when the markets are down. Now, for the remaining funds, then, once you have the emergency funds set aside, you might have some other funds left over. Or if you had a huge pile of savings and a small part of it is enough for emergencies, then the rest, statistically, you should invest it all at once, because the more you have invested, the more it can grow. But in real life, and also human psychology wise, things are different than what statistics would tell us. And investing all you have at once is not ideal. So what could happen is that if the markets go down the day or a week after you started investing, and your portfolio is therefore down by a lot, and you may have invested a massive amount of your savings all at once, and the savings that you've invested now suddenly seem like they're down, or you've lost now 10% or 15% of your life savings, then that's a huge hit to your personal confidence. Statistically, though, it's more likely to see a good first few months when starting rather than bad ones. However, what happens if you start just before a few bad months? You need to remember that we're in this for the long haul, and we shouldn't let our confidence get affected. Remember that even in the previous scenarios, in the very first video, when we asked the question, when is the best time to invest? Even if you invested just before the dot-com bubble crashed in the 2000s, or if you've invested just before the global financial crisis, so you invested at the peaks just before a crash, still in the long run, things recover and things grow over time. So it's always technically a good time to invest. But the main thing that gets affected here is our confidence. Our confidence is like, oh no, like the markets are down 10, 15%, should I pull out? We don't want to have this happen. So remember the case of Rosie Rotten. In our previous example scenarios of 5 different characters, Peter Perfect, Matthew Monthly, Ashley Action, Rosie Rotten, and Larry Linger. Rosie Rotten, so the person who had the worst luck out of everyone, who always invested at the worst time of a year, still did way better than Larry Linger. And remember, Larry Linger didn't invest at all. He just kept his money in treasury bills and never really invested in equities at all. And Rosie Rotten still had more than twice the amount of money that Larry Linger had over the time period. So even with the worst luck possible, if you invest passively in index funds, you will still do much better in the long run, as long as you can just stay confident and just trust in the process. Seeing things suddenly go down after you've invested a large amount all at once, it's more of a mental, emotional cost. So what we recommend actually is, of course, this is not investment advice. We're not licensed to do that. This is purely educational content. What we would recommend for ourselves is splitting your investable savings into 12 and investing it in chunks over time into the market with the very same strategy. So focusing on the power of habit and focusing on the long term. This is exactly what Matthew Monthly did in the example scenarios, where he pretty much, instead of Ashley Action, who invested all at once, and Ashley Action performed therefore the best because it was more of money spending in time in the market. Matthew Monthly split it over time, and that's also known as dollar cost averaging. It's a very common strategy and is great to help sort of even things out. So even if you invest the first 12th in the first month, second 12th in the second month, and then the market takes a huge dip. It's great for you because then you can consistently keep investing while the market is low or having a bad time, and you won't feel the huge emotional effect of all your savings go down a huge chunk, because that's very emotionally draining. Ideally, this is one of the many reasons why we don't actually want to look at our portfolio so often, and we want to maybe check it once every 3 or 6 months ideally, and only go into it when you're depositing more funds each month to invest further into index funds. But you don't really want to think about your portfolio all too much, because in the end, remember, there's always short-term volatility. But just don't beat yourself up. Don't try to time the market. Just trust in the process and trust that the global economy as a whole will create value over the long term. Now, tips to stay consistent. What happens if I see losses? So this is exactly what we're talking about. So tip one, having an emergency fund. Having emergency fund on the side, that definitely helps our ability to keep contributing to the market and never having to interrupt it unnecessarily. You never want to need to sell your investments. That's the benefit of having an emergency fund. So for any expenses that come up, whether it's medical or your car breaks down, etc., taking the money from the emergency fund and not being forced into a bad situation where you have to sell your investments. Ideally, you don't want to touch that. Now, tip two, as mentioned, trusting the process and not making deals with the devil. Now, what do I mean by making deals with the devils? Is when you try to get a little bit aggressive and you get a little bit ballsy in terms of like, you know what? I'm actually going to go for higher risk. I'm going to start, I'm very confident on Microsoft or Tesla, or I want to invest more into Bitcoin. If you start engaging in stock picking, please try to limit it, or just ideally don't do it at all. Because we'll see here a quote from Psychology of Money, where index investing is good for most. Stock picking is also fine, just very, very hard and harder than people think. Remember, most passive index funds vastly outperform the majority of actively managed funds and professionals. So, I mean, stock picking is fine. Sometimes it's like almost like the lottery. Sometimes you will win, you will beat the market, but trying to consistently be able to do this over like a 30-year period every year is something that's very, very unlikely for you to do. And even professionals that hold decades of experience doing this, still most of them don't actually manage to beat the market. Of course, there's a few exceptional few that have a competitive edge, that have so much information available to them and complex trading strategies that they're just way ahead of us. But I think if you're taking this course, then it's very clear that this is not you. Don't expect to beat financial professional investors. And also, to be honest, you don't want to be spending all that time researching the exact best investments for you and at what time, etc. You want to take that time and put it into something else instead. Go to the gym, spend time with your family, spend time on your work. Ideally, you don't want to be thinking about stock picking at all. Just trust the process. And here we have another quote. My strategy doesn't rely on timing the market or picking the right sector. It relies on savings rate, patience, and an optimism that the global economy will create value over the next decades. I spend all my efforts focusing on the first two, especially since I can actually control that. So it's the savings rate and patience that we can control, and these are the things that we fundamentally rely on. Everything will take care of itself. Now, tip number 3 is calendar consistency. So we'll go over this in the next milestone, but keeping the automatic calendar entry so that you stay consistent and pay yourself first into the market, even when it goes down. You just need to control your savings rate and patience, and the world will take care of the rest. So just remember, pay yourself first means paying into your future first. So instead of once your paycheck goes in, you then immediately go into big luxury expenses or whatever, make sure to pay your future self first. Take the money that you have already pre-agreed according to whatever savings rate you want to invest at. Take that money, deposit it into your investment account. Either it happens automatically if you have that set up, or if you just are relying on your calendar reminder yourself, just on that day when the money comes in, put it into your investment account. Make sure it's invested into an index fund or invested further into a portfolio that you have set up, and then just do that. Stay consistent. Make sure you force yourself every month or however often you get paid to do this, as consistency will really push things forward. Now, how to deal with when there's a hype in a sector and if we should invest. This is a huge issue for a lot of people. That you see a hype in a sector, like, I don't know, that we used to have in crypto or now we have with AI. There's always going to be hype. And people always ask, hey, should I invest in this sector? And the problem with hype is that you can make a lot of money for sure. There's potential for that. And this is why it's so seductive. But the thing is, you just never know when the music can suddenly stop. Think about all the people that you know that invested into crypto because of the hype and not because they were early believers of the technology. And the situation is either you're super early and you make a lot, or you aren't and you then lose a lot of money when things crash. And the problem here, or here's the kicker, is that if there's hype and you know that there's hype, then it's actually already too late. Hype investing is more of a gamble, actually, instead of a reliable investing strategy, and is not something that we recommend. Not to mention, it's also incredibly stressful. It takes a lot of time and mental space trying to figure out, is now the best time to invest? Is it about to crash now? Should I sell now? It's hugely emotionally draining, and you spend a lot of time trying to think about it. So spare yourself the emotional cost, the high risk to your wealth, and spare yourself the time that you're spending on this. Just stick to consistency in your strategy and keep it simple. And how to surround yourself with other investors to keep learning. Great, you're at the right place. That's exactly why we've got the community in Skool where you can exchange with like-minded individuals, share thoughts or questions or share your progress, and think about further ideas for investing or other methods. And that's what the community is there for. It's for all of us to help each other in learning and exploring how we can invest. And now a few final steps to get started. Be clear on how much you will invest per month and put it into your calendar. Make sure to stay consistent with your investing no matter the market conditions. So that's sometimes the main blocker for people. Sometimes people panic sell. Sometimes people then stop investing into the market because they think it's going down. Just stay consistent and stay simple with index funds and ETFs, or maybe core portfolios like smart core portfolios from BlackRock. Don't give in to market pressure or hype. And of course, make sure to clear any high interest debt that you have before investing. So there's no point investing and gaining an average of 9, 10, 11, 12% per year if you have high interest debt of 20, 30% that you need to get rid of first. So make sure you clear your high interest debt first. And then make sure you're also comfortable with using the broker. So that's why we had the module 2 where you're used to clicking things around. We're now at module 3 where you then understood all the concepts, and just go into the broker, make sure you feel comfortable, watch the previous videos again if you're feeling like you need a refresh, and then start as soon as you feel comfortable and you have the funds to invest. Remember, starting early and forming the habit is where the biggest wins happen. So start small, but be consistent. It's the habit that's really going to build wealth for you over the long term. And I think this is the last slide, and that's all we have for today's lesson. Looking forward to seeing you in the next lesson, and have a great time. Enjoy. Bye-bye.